pleased to welcome Mr. Marty Johnson, who is the founder and president of a great organization called ISLES, Inc., founded in 1981 with the purpose of?
It's a nonprofit community development organization focused on environmental solutions. It's based in Trenton, trying to come up with innovative ways to meet a 9-word mission, which is foster self-reliant families and healthy, sustainable communities. So that is an interesting way of approaching some of these challenges that we face in tougher communities.
Back in the day, 1989, Marty and I were in the second class of a great organization called Leadership New Jersey. I met you then, and I thought, the tremendous passion that you had and have today to help people. Where does that come from?
So that's a really good question. I go back to my grandparents who moved up from the South. They were sharecroppers. They wanted to work in the rubber factories of Akron, Ohio, and struggled. They ultimately found a job there. My parents grew up in those families and had a pretty challenging time. My mother was in an accident when I was young. She couldn't walk a good chunk of my childhood. My father ended up leaving when I turned 16. Little brother and sister at home, mother in a difficult body cast, and you know, the football coaches from Princeton University come to my high school. So I'm trying to be a high school kid and dealing with those challenges that come with being, with having those deep questions about, you know, where's food, where's housing come from for us as a family, and darned if I didn't get in. So I got thrown in the middle of Princeton's campus as a football player.
And you actually wrote was it your senior thesis?
Yeah, I sure did. I wrote a senior. I was able to visit Northeast Brazil second half of my junior year and I looked at some challenges of a development in a fishing village there, and it got me thinking a lot about, aren't there better ways of doing development in places that need it, that would both strengthen those that you intend to serve there in those communities as well as the environment. And out of that, I wrote a senior thesis on that project, but started looking at, okay, if you were to do this better, what would it look like? And me and a couple of others decided to take that theory and put it into practice. We created ISLES when I was a senior, and I've never had a real job, Steve.
I hear you, but you work at it every day. Fast forward. Weatherization of homes is a big piece of this, because we talked to our friends over at PSEG, and I know they're a part of this as well. Make that connection for us in terms of energy efficiency / weatherization of homes.
So the largest line item in a family's budget is their housing, and that includes the utility bill, right? And so we have thousands of homes in these neighborhoods that we're looking at, Trenton, Newark, Camden, elsewhere, thousands of homes that haven't seen even the first generation of energy upgrades. That's a travesty, because not only are we heating the sidewalks during the wintertime, but these families are paying enormous amounts of money for this. So it's costing lots of us, taxpayers, those families, money for that to happen. And of course, if you care about climate change, this is a classic example of stuff that you can do to save energy. And so PSE&G is in this interesting position of both selling energy and saving energy, right? We're going to be hearing more about that over this coming year and the implications of maybe decoupling those incentives. But they began about 10 years ago, a more intensive look at ways to save energy, and we had been involved in that as well. And so they came to us and said, is there a way for us to partner? And so we helped them get access to households in Trenton, which is sometimes hard for them to do. We also began doing retrofits of homes, weatherization.
What's it cost for families?
What does the utility cost?
No. What does it cost for these families to get this done?
Well, it depends. If they're very low-income families, it costs them nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. If they're moderate-income families, it costs them a percentage of the total cost of that. Yeah, it's based on the ability to pay. The long-term savings are enormous, right? So it's well in everyone's interest for there to be more and more of that kind of work being done. But as you can imagine, these are challenging neighborhoods. Most contractors don't want to go into those neighborhoods. They don't want to be knocking on the doors. They don't want to be doing the assessment, that type of thing. What we found, though, is, and I think this is important, what we found, though, as we were doing this other work, like community gardening work, is that the issue of lead kept coming in.
What does lead have to do with?
Right? And so that's the question is, what does lead have to do with energy?
That's right.
Well, what we started to, as we started doing community gardening, you got to get good at looking at the lead, because the background soil in places like Trenton, probably 60% of it probably is contaminated. And so we're doing raised bed, bringing in clean soil so you can, you know, grow your longest carrot. As we got good at that, the state came to us and said, the state DEP.
The Department of Environmental Protection? It came went to ISLES?
Protection came to ISLES and said, this is about 15 years after we started doing the urban ag work, and they said, we know you guys are
Urban agriculture.
urban agriculture. We know you guys are doing this work on these contaminated sites. We know you're not coming to us for permission, but we think it's pretty interesting. How about looking at brownfield sites, the larger industrial sites? There were about 100 of them in Trenton alone, which had been contaminated and abandoned. And so, you know, after a while, we finally said, yeah, I guess we can take a look at that. It was a little scary.
So, sorry for cutting you off, Marty. Help us understand what the impact has been of those efforts.
So, good organizations learn. So we were told to take a look at these 4 sites, ways to involve the community in that process. Maybe if we brought people together, we could find ways to both protect kids who were playing on those sites, as well as get them on the radar screen and cleaned up, redeveloped. That's the long-term hope. What we found, though, is as we brought experts in, the mothers would say, in particular, what's been the impact of that site on my child?
Yeah, what happens to those children? What is the impact?
And you know what the experts said? We don't know.
No, they didn't say we don't know.
Well, they said we don't know. It depends on how much the kid has been playing over here versus over there. And so that was not a very acceptable answer, right? And so we started thinking we got to do a better assessment here. We were seeing this data that these kids were having health outcomes that were just not good, right? And so what we started doing is going from the brownfield sites into the surrounding neighborhoods and doing testing, backyards, inside the homes.
What were we finding?
And what we were finding was like shocking.
We're looking at some photos of it.
Right? It was shocking.
High
What we were
levels.
finding is that over 65% of the homes that we were testing shouldn't have been lived in by children. The dust in the homes, it's about a half a pack of sugar, you know, from your restaurant sugar packs. About a half a pack of sugar is worth of lead will permanently damage a child.
Permanently.
And so what's going on
real quick?
is that, well, it impacts their brain,
Respiratory
right?
system?
So it's your cognitive functions, it's impulse control and the behavioral front. The challenge of lead is that the researchers don't know really what's going to happen. They don't know whether that impact is going to be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. What we do know is that prisons are full of inmates who've got, if you drill into their bone marrow, there's a lot of lead. So that it has enormous impacts.
So we've got about a minute left. Real quick, what's being done in that regard?
The important thing is that not only do we know more about this problem now, we figured out low-cost ways to go into these homes and weatherize the home. At the same time, we're doing the retrofits for lead, and that's the key. ILS
has been around since 1981. As I said before, I've known Marty as classmates back in '89 in Leadership, New Jersey, and it's not just your passion, but your commitment to making a difference in the lives of other people, particularly those who too often are forgotten. It's just incredibly impressive. And we honor you for your efforts. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Steve.
Well done.
Yeah, appreciate it.